its current form, giving the minister, in essence, powers to set both export controls over minerals that are needed for beneficiation and giving him some degree of price control power as well. There's a potential loss of mining rights if the department takes the view that companies have failed to comply with the mining charter. And there's this new land claims process which is already in motion and which has yielded something like 60,000 new land claims already. Plus we have a host of other land regulations which are still in the pipeline, as I've talked about. The land ceilings, the 50-50 down in the farms proposal, the idea of state custodianship of all agricultural land, the idea of farming leases under DAP. And this is very similar, it seems to me, to the EFF idea that the state should have custodianship of the land and that farmers should have leases with the state. There's also the expropriation bill, which is now before Parliament, and this is justified by the League for Land Reform, but of course the definition of property extends way beyond land, and so the expropriation bill is likely to be used in much wider circumstances, simply in land reform. Come to the economic impact of the BEE codes, and I'm not going to say very much on this because they're economists who can say much more than I can. But the value of known economic deals, BEE deals, has been put at 600 billion. That was back in 2013. Only the known ones, in other words, those that have taken place within listed companies. There are also BEE deals outside of the listed company space, and those we very often don't know about. The deals required could easily rise to 1.2 trillion. This was the National Economic Empowerment Fund's estimate back in 2007, or more, because though JSE research indicates that black people now own 23% of the JSE, President Zuma has said, no, it's only 3%, and at least 2%. That the amount of the JSE which still has to be transferred, the market capitalization, is 2.6 trillion. There are many other direct costs in terms of getting verification and so on. And there are many indirect costs which are harder to quantify, but they're nevertheless real. How much more management time has to be spent on every aspect of doing business, from appointing staff to deciding who you can buy your goods and services from. And inevitably there is reduced efficiency. There's also major opportunity costs, particularly in the way of less direct investment. Aliko Dangote, the Nigerian billionaire, warned our government against BEE deals a while ago. He said that Nigeria used to have similar rules, but it scrapped them because they deterred foreign direct investment. It results in lower growth and hence in fewer jobs. And there is, of course, major procurement waste. If the government is going to give a BEE weighting or allow those who have BEE status to charge 50% more, this has major implications for the cost of state procurement and for the waste that can entail. Then there are other economic costs of BEE, but it undermines black entrepreneurship and encourages dependency, as Maletsi and Becky has said. That it prejudices small black businesses that lack political connections, as Lawrence Mavundla, president of NAFCOC, has said. He's very upset about BEE. He says it's not the ordinary black businesses that get the tenders, it's the tender thieves that get them. And it distracts attention from key obstacles to advancement for the truly disadvantaged. And those obstacles range from bad schools and few jobs to broken families, drug and alcohol abuse, and high rates of violent crime. And BEE perhaps gives us some feeling that we're doing something to uplift the disadvantaged, so we don't pay enough attention to those key obstacles. Some of the ANC's criticisms of BEE, just to go through those quickly. Pravin Gordhan, BEE policies have not worked or made South Africa a fairer place. And Gwede Mantashe talking about procurement. This thing of having a bottle of water which costs 7 rand, procured by the government for 27 rand, because you want to create a middle-class person who must have a business, is not on. It must stop. But, of course, it's not being ended. Rather, the rules are being ratcheted up, despite the gains which have in fact been made. And part of the reason why BEE doesn't stop is because it's a major factor in corruption. Galema Motlanthe said in 2007 that BEE was fueling corruption at all tiers. The ANC itself has said that councillors are looting state resources through BEE tenders, and this perhaps the ultimate indication of how it works from the BEE businessman. You pay to get a tender, you pay to be paid once you've done the work, and you must grease the machinery, in other words, make donations to the ANC, their youth league, and also to the SACP. So BEE contributes to corruption, which has been estimated probably quite conservatively at 30 billion rand a year. And BEE also helps to attain the aims of the National Democratic Revolution. One such aim is to eliminate apartheid property relations. But here the word apartheid is a red herring. Replace it with the word existing and you begin to see what the aim is. Another aim is to apply affirmative action until all centres of power are demographically representative. But the ANC's idea of centres of power extends far beyond the public service. It also includes the private sector, the judiciary, the media, universities, civil society. And the need for demographic representativity helps advance a third aim, to use cadre deployment to bring all these centres of power under ANC control. And just a little bit more here, BEE is being used to erode property rights. It started with water, then mineral resources, now land. Each time it's the state that's the beneficiary, not ordinary black South Africans. But property rights are vital to business and the individual's economic independence from the state. Things like cadre deployment to the judiciary erode the rule of law, which is also vital to the free market system. And BEE failures are used to fuel demands for nationalisation. The N word is not being used as often as it was in the past, but it's maybe worth just having a look at the sort of things that were said a little while ago by the SACP, for example, that BEE has failed and nationalisation is now needed to ensure more egalitarian outcomes. COSATU, BEE has failed to address inequalities, and so there is a need for the nationalisation of key industries. And Susan Shabango in 2010, when she was mining minister, the mining sector has brought the nationalisation debate on itself by failing to implement the mining charter. If we look at the performance of the economy, annual average economic growth rates since 1994 have been at around 3% of GDP, not the 6% or more that we need. Growth in real GDP per head was 1.1% in 1994, which was pretty bad, but then we were coming out of apartheid and 10 years of People's War, down to 0.1% in 2014. In South Africa, average annual growth in GDP per head in a longer period, 1971 to 2012, 0.6% as opposed to 6% in Botswana. Government debt as a percentage of GDP, 48% in 1994, again coming out of apartheid and People's War, 46% last year. And social grants, as we know, go to some 16 million people, but we have a tax base of only about 5 million people who pay personal income tax in order to support that. A few figures on unemployment. The unemployment rate at the end of 2014 was 24.3%. It's gone up since then. This is on the strict definition, at 35% on the expanded one. Youth joblessness, people aged 15 to 24. Again, in 2014, it was 52% on the strict definition, 65% on the expanded one, 70% on the expanded one among young black Africans. And in numbers, we had 1.6 million black Africans unemployed on the strict definition in 1994, up to 4.4 million in 2014. And in 1994, 3.2 million black Africans jobless on the expanded definition, up to 7.3 million last year. There's also the significance of the fact that BEE is racially based. The racial basis has many negative consequences, and those have further negative economic effects. It leads to rigid racial quotas, which companies are going to come under ever more pressure to comply with, and this, of course, adds to inefficiency. It requires an informal racial classification and promotes racial polarization. And the emphasis is always on white racism as the cause of inequality, which brushes over complex factors such as family breakdown and the differences in median age between black and white, which simply are ignored in the rush to blame white racism. Critically, it erodes social trust and it keeps our focus on the past instead of the future. In conclusion, BEE both bypasses and harms the poor. W. de Klerk has often said that BEE helps the top 15%, but it's not really doing anything for the other 85%. And that, of course, makes sense, because the other 85% are very unlikely to be able to take part in BEE deals, or get management jobs, or get new preferential or tenders to discharge, or have SMEs of their own to run. But the poor are not simply bypassed by BEE, they're actively harmed by it, because it reduces investment, it lowers growth, it limits jobs. It also provides cover for the true goals of the NDR, and it enables the SACP, particularly on the side of property rights, to achieve elements of socialism now, even before the NDR reaches its final goal, which is, of course, to introduce a socialist and then communist society. Thank you.